This video is part one of a two-part series that will cover the DX160 solid-state 5-band communications receiver, importantly the second edition. And what I'm showing here is the service manual, not the user manual, the service manual, and it relates to US serial numbers starting 418411 or greater. The other numbers are there for Canadian or UK, Belgium, that sort of thing. But this you must have in order to fully understand and appreciate what I'll be covering today. So what we are going to cover are basic modifications that apply that we're going to be able to do in the first video. We've discussed the service manual, but we're going to list and discuss the upgrade components required, which I'm listing here: one resistor, 5K ohms, one neon bulb, one short LED strip with adhesive backing, one large silicon rectifier, one 1K ohm pot, one set of 12 volt terminals, one fuse holder, a panel mount or other fuse holder will work, hookup wire red in color, insulated, and some plated copper hookup wire and aluminum back tape. So only the most basic things that you can do and get an immediate result with will be covered here. We do want to start off understanding the tools required too, because there are a few. We need a soldering iron, we need step drill or punches, we need marking pen or scribers, solvents, lubricants, solder wick, we need 60/40 solder or better, and we should also understand the desoldering or soldering techniques and temperatures. First of all, since we're working mainly on PCBs, we want to use the lowest temperature possible and as brief amount of heating as possible. We want to wick the solder away and clean residue after reworking, leaving absolutely no droplets of solder. So the components that are directly affected will pertain to replacing the existing R2 resistor, which is 220 ohms as it arrives from the factory. We're going to be putting in a 5,000 ohm resistor, and across it a neon bulb that acts as a discharger, static discharger, particularly on the low bands. We're going to be removing capacitor C64 by lifting one leg of it. We're going to be shorting capacitor C77 out with an antenna trimmer demonstration. We're going to replace the knob if required, and we're going to get into the back panel RF shielding. The cleaning and lubrication actually is another part of it. The band switch has to be done in 2 steps. We're going to look at the rear apron layout, the changes that have been made, the 12 volt DC modifications that include installing polarity protection and a fuse, installing LED lamps and a dimmer, installing a new set of 12 volt DC terminals, and then we're going to demonstrate the radio both on 110 volt AC and DC. So we've got a lot of things to do in such a simple change as this. And so why don't we just get right to it. We have the radio on and running off of AC, and I want to zoom in on the S meter here because that's the demonstration we're going to need. Hope you can see that. I'm having a little trouble seeing it myself. Let me shut some light off here. So let me crank back the RF gain a little bit. It's still somewhat hard to see, but I want to rock the antenna trimmer to show you that the needle moves all over the place when it's being rocked. I'm turning it completely around. Okay, I think you can barely see it, but you can see it. Alright, so that is how it should work, and there's a reason why it may not be working on yours, and I believe it's due to the C77. I'm going to take this back out here. That's one of the changes that we're going to be doing. So I listed them. We're going to replace that resistor R2. We're going to remove the capacitor C64 by lifting one leg, short out capacitor C77, And I mentioned the knobs and the back panel shielding. I just wanted to briefly show you the shielding, how that looks. That this was covered in someone else's video. You just simply glue, if you want, aluminum foil, but I used aluminum tape. It's self-adhesive, and then cut out the holes. That basically makes it work, and that'll give you a little bit of shielding. It's mounted on the back of the radio. So now I want to demonstrate the operation of the radio on DC. Turn on the power supply. Okay, so what we have is are the LEDs, and there is a dimmer control. We can have bright, as you can see here, or not so bright by simply just turning a pot that's mounted on the rear apron, which we'll cover in just a second. And wanted to turn up the volume here. And of course in the DC mode, the same thing applies with the antenna trimmer. We're rocking it quite a bit, and you can see it's very effective. So next I'm going to cover the actual component changes. This is the back panel where the changes have occurred or been installed. The fuse holder has been installed into the old power connector hole, and then in the place of the power connector that was there, then the two banana plugs and binding posts I had to locate and drill. I used a step drill to get those exactly right. And then also importantly, on the back panel I've added a dimmer control so that when we're in 12 volt DC operation, that it's possible to control the brightness of the display, which can be actually a little too bright if you didn't have that in there. I wanted to mention C64 that we just pulled the leg up out of. It's just been slightly desoldered and then just pulled. That's one of the changes. Don't want to forget the back panel. I mentioned that earlier, that it was covered with aluminum foil, or I used aluminum tape, and then that just simply goes into place here and provides a little bit better shielding. Moving back over to the changes, some of the wiring you can see coming out of here where the LEDs were connected. They're underneath this piece of foil that I scotch taped on here, and they're down in there. They're quite bright, so I didn't need very much of it to actually achieve the result desired. And let's go ahead and turn the radio over so I can show you the rest of the changes that were made. Let me get it in light here. So up inside here you can see where the dimmer control is. It's located in not a very busy corner there. Then the two 12 volt connectors come through, the fuse holder, color coded red wire, and then moving on down I have a terminal strip I installed with the rectifier, fairly heavy rectifier, an additional polarity protection precaution, and then that's of course goes into the main feed for the chassis, which is here actually. Let's see what, oh, I want to talk about the wafer switch and the cleaning and the care thereof. So you want a high quality solvent to put onto these various wafers, and then you basically switch the switch back and forth until they're clean, and it will need it. If the radio's of any age been sitting for any length of time, the final step is to get some lubricant. You need whatever one that will work for you. There are some brands out there, I forget which one exactly I picked up, but a tube of it to get in there, so because there's a detente spring and that never was lubricated, so you need to do that. After you get through with this, you should be able to have the audio fairly high up, and you won't notice any clicking or popping on the audio. You'll hear the switch clicking, but not the audio. When I first got it, it would make a very disturbing pop. So I wanted to mention another thing before I forget. The trimmer capacitor was replaced by the previous owner. He thought that it wasn't working apparently, which I'll get to why it wasn't working in just a second. But it had a different shaft in it. It had a solid aluminum bar shaft coming out of it, which is not what the original had. thus the knob wasn't usable any longer. So when I got it, he had kind of a funky knob on there, and I made this one out of aluminum, solid aluminum bar, shaped it so that it looks pretty much like the others, and then put a piece of tightly fitting electrical tape around it, and you can just barely tell there's much difference as you just look at it. I don't have the tick mark on it, but it doesn't matter. You actually don't need it for that particular knob. Moving back over here, I think maybe it's best to turn the radio upside down the other way. Let's do that. Let's just turn it upside down. Okay. Now, C77 is where we wanted to make that change. So what you do is you just short out C77. Just take a piece of, you know, conducting any little piece of wire you got. I use some standard tinned hookup wire. You notice that I've marked everything. Anytime I make a change, I note that for the future. The other change that was made is a little harder to see, but as you look down into this part of the radio, you'll notice there's a neon bulb across the new resistor, the 5,000 ohm resistor, and that neon bulb is for discharge, for static discharge. I haven't had a lot of that happen, but I suppose it could. So far I haven't been connected to an external antenna, but on the AM bands you won't probably be needing an external antenna, so I haven't had a lot of experience with getting any discharges, but they say it's supposed to help. That is a neon bulb, so if you do it, make sure that it is a neon and not an LED, because that will not help you. Just want to add a quick note for what's going to be covered in the next video. I did not yet do the electrolytic capacitor substitution. There's a kit of things. I do have the kit, and I want to go over that in detail before I do it and then show the results. I'm going to be adding a frequency counter upgrade or electronic dial. I want to go over the undocumented part substitutions because there are some, and there are some notes I need to add to what I downloaded from the internet. Then finally the receiver alignment, and I mentioned that you should get a hold of this solid state 5-band communications receiver service manual, because down here you'll start to notice that there are quite a number of marginal notes that were made. I have updates to these because there's some additional part substitutions, but since we didn't do that this time, I'm just telling you ahead of time that we'll need to go over that, and we'll need to understand a lot more about what's going on there. But mostly it's just that there were some changes, and there have been some other additions that have come along since the time that this person ever uploaded that version of it. So I'll be seeing you in the next video, and hopefully you've got some basic things that you can do or start doing right now if you have a DX160, and enjoy it on DC, and do all that stuff right and have fun with it.